Well, welcome again to another episode of Letters to Tim, where I respond to letters that we receive from people that watch our YouTube channel and send in questions about their life and what they're dealing with. And I always struggle with these to an extent because if I was in a counseling situation, I would explore what people shared with me initially just to make sure I understood it, just to make sure that we really were getting a clear picture of the real issues here. And I don't have that option here, but I'm taking what they're saying, and in many cases I can tell they've been watching videos, they've been learning lots of stuff about complex trauma, and they're getting a pretty good picture of some of their underlying issues. So I'm making a few assumptions that I hope are accurate, and I hope that my responses are helpful. So the letter today is from Andy, and it reads like this. Dear Tim, I was born in the mid-1990s to very young parents who did not plan upon my arrival. Their relationship was unstable, often shifting between warmth and coldness, and eventually ended after serious conflict. My mother left to protect us, and I spent part of my early childhood growing up in a blended family. My stepfather wasn't the best partner to my mom, but he was an okay dad to me. When I was around 5 years old, I experienced inappropriate behavior from older relatives. Later, my mom became ill and took my younger sister and me to live with my grandparents. Not long after, my mother passed away. I was still a child, and losing her changed everything. My grandmother was short-tempered and used physical punishment when she felt disrespected or overwhelmed. I grew up afraid of her, and my grandfather never intervened. My aunt and her husband also lived with us. While they could be kind at times, they struggled with addiction, financial instability, and neglect toward their own children. I don't remember my grandmother ever standing up for me when my aunt made hurtful comments or when conflicts arose with other adults in the home. Looking back, I know my basic needs were met. We had food, clothing, a home, and schooling, but I don't remember warmth, comfort, or emotional safety. I don't remember ever being hugged, reassured, or met with understanding. Love felt conditional and distant, more about survival than connection. As an adult, I struggle with boundaries, especially in relationships with men. I'm still learning how to see myself outside of people-pleasing and how to understand what unconditional love actually is. I often question what a healthy relationship feels like, first with myself and then with others. I'm afraid of being betrayed, and it's hard for me to trust or fully open up. I worry that what I say or do might push people away. At the same time, I'm learning to let go of relationships that don't feel safe or aligned, and I'm slowly breaking old patterns without as much guilt as before. My question is this: how do experiences like these affect the brain of a small child into adulthood, especially when it comes to trust, identity, boundaries, and relationships? Thank you, Andy. Again, your experience is so common to people that I deal with, and you ask some very good questions, and you also really show that you've done a lot of growth and understanding and self-awareness so far. But let me just highlight again what I see as some of the major issues that you grew up with. And I would say that you would probably be in the more severe end of the complex trauma spectrum. So number one, your mom's pregnancy, she hadn't planned for it. So they may have seen you as a mistake. And that's sometimes what a child picks up on through their neuroception, is that they've always felt a bit unwanted. That might never have been said to them, but they might have sensed it somehow. Then there was a lot of conflict and tension in your parents' relationship and violence at times, and that creates a ton of lack of safety for a child. Then your parents separated, divorced, and you went through that rift, that separation, and that creates huge issues for a child. You did not experience healthy attachment in your life. You felt trauma bonding. That was part of your experience. You did not have stability. You did not have safety. You did not have security. You went through sexual abuse. You went through your mother passing away, the deep loss of your one rock. And then you had an angry, violent grandmother and a grandfather who enabled that and didn't stand up to that. And so grandmother was narcissistic and you had to live within that. You experienced lots of criticism, lack of compassion, lack of emotional needs being met. Then there was a chaos element due to your aunt and uncle living with you and all that they were going through in their own personal instability. Then you felt betrayal. Nobody defended you. Nobody stood up for you. You didn't experience warmth, comfort, nurture. You then therefore experienced lack of trust, deep shame that you weren't good enough, and so you had to learn to fawn. You were afraid to be authentic because that would lead to rejection. So you went through a lot as a child. And then the loss of your mom, to me, that piece of your life that was your one stable refuge, harbor, rock, the little bit of attachment you had was severed. That, to me, was just a catastrophic event for you. So all of those events, and what I want to, you asked about the brain, but I want people to understand those events are so overwhelming to a child that they affect not just their brain, though they affect that dramatically, and we'll get into that. They affect the whole nervous system. They affect your whole sense of identity. That the problem is you're not good enough. You must be a zero because you've been abandoned by everybody in your life, starting with dad, then mom dying, on and on. We go through over 80 different ways that this kind of trauma affects people in their body, in their emotions, in their nervous system, in their brain, and how they cope and how they do relationships. The list goes on and on. So let me give you some of them and then branch into the brain. But most kids who have gone through what you've gone through experience deep anger. Then they experience deep shame, identity issues. Who am I? Not feeling good enough, feeling that if anybody gets to know the real me, they will reject me and abandon me. That leads to relationship struggles. That leads to trouble identifying their emotions and trouble regulating their emotions. That leads to anxious or avoidant attachment issues when it comes to relationships. That leads to hundreds of unhealthy default settings and default programs in their brain when it comes to coping, when it comes to relationship, when it comes to relationship templates, when it comes to beliefs that they have. All of that they're not even aware of, but it's running their life. And that's really where we begin to look at how it affects your brain. Complex trauma isn't just about what's happening in your conscious brain. It's about what's happening in your subconscious brain, which is operating 90% of the time what you do and how you think and how you feel. And let me just give you a couple examples of what is going on in your subconscious brain. What comes out of complex trauma is a belief that if I am authentic, nobody will attach to me. Attachment will not be possible. I will be rejected. I will be abandoned. The healthy way to go about life is, if I want attachment, I must be authentic with safe people. That is the recipe to healthy attachment. But to a complex trauma person, attachment isn't possible if I'm authentic. What they don't see is because I'm with unsafe people. So they go into adult life saying, I can't be authentic because nobody will want to attach to me. They'll reject me. So I must wear masks. I must play roles. That operates out of their subconscious. That sets them up for relationships to fail. That is just one program, one belief in your subconscious. Secondly, if I'm neglected, if I'm abused, I must have done something wrong. It must be my fault. I must need to change. I must need to adapt. I am not lovable just the way I am. So I must always put my needs down, put my authenticity aside, become what others want. I must earn love. I must earn love, and the only way into relationships is becoming what you want me to be. Fawning. That becomes part of the subconscious, a belief that messes them up for years to come. And then another one. If I stand up for myself and say no and set a boundary, people will not like me. They will get mad at me. They will not want a relationship with me. So the only way for people to like me and have a relationship with me is I can't say no. I can't stand up for myself. That's in the subconscious. And so what I want you to see is there's thousands of beliefs that made sense to a child who was living with unsafe people. But now they cause your relationships, your ways of coping, all to be based on lies that cause you pain and trouble. And so you don't become aware of those usually until somebody starts teaching you, until you begin to bring the subconscious to the conscious. And that's where taking a course like our Lift course, where you're going to get lots of teaching and begin to develop an awareness of many of these lies that have operated out of the subconscious, is going to be so important and helpful. And that's why, to me, healing for many people is not 3 easy steps. One of the biggest, most important first steps is this growth in self-awareness, bringing the subconscious to the conscious, where you become aware of the thousands of lies and distortions that have been running your life for years. They made sense to the child, they were the truth to the child, but they now need to be looked at. There's another way that complex trauma affects the brain that many don't realize still bothers them in adult life, and that is hypervigilance. But hypervigilance, so a child that has had danger and gets hurt, they become hypervigilant. They're looking for danger. But then the brain develops a negative bias. It is looking for negative. It is not looking to see things accurately. It will actually read potential negative into situations because it's better to be safe than sorry. So now your brain is actually attracted to negative. Your brain goes quickly to negative thinking, to negative conclusions, to worst case scenarios, to a negative bias. That can cause huge issues for you in adult life. Another way is brain fog. So what happens as stress elevates is you go out of your cortex, where you're clearly thinking and processing. You go to your limbic system, brain stem, the greater the stress becomes. Cortisol shuts down your cortex system. It puts you into survival mode. And there you don't think as clearly. It's like you get foggy in your thinking, fuzzy in your thinking. You even can't think of words. You can't remember concepts. You can't remember tools. That happens as stress goes up. And so we call that brain fog. And so people can still struggle with that in adult life when they're in higher stress situations. It's like they feel like they're stupid all of a sudden. They just can't think. Then many people coming out of complex trauma have intrusive thoughts. They are going along in life and all of a sudden, you're a loser. You should kill yourself. The world would be better off without you. You should harm yourself. jumps into their head and they go, where in the world did that come from? It's so important to understand that the healing brain is a part of the brain. There's still other parts of the brain that haven't healed. There's still parts of the brain that are still operating off of old programming, old messages. And once in a while, they're going to get triggered. And once in a while, they're going to send a message to your conscious brain. That's not the real you. That's a part of your brain. That's not your total brain thinking that. That's a small portion of your brain thinking that. But it's a phenomenon that still happens. And it's learning not to feed it, not to argue with it, not to fight it. Just, okay, that part of the brain is doing its job, but I don't have to listen to it. And moving on with your day. Then there's another thing that happens from complex trauma, and that is to stay in the conscious brain to a child means to stay in pain. It means to stay in hopeless situations where they're helpless. So they learn that the worst place to be is be present in the present. So we need to not be in the present. So let's distract ourselves. Let's stay busy. Let's do video games. Let's run around. Let's constantly do entertaining things that are exciting, because then I don't have to feel. Then I don't have to be present in the present. So dissociation is something that the brain does when stress gets too much, too painful. For the conscious brain to handle, it begins to dissociate. And people can still struggle with that today, where they all of a sudden get antsy. They need to be busy. They zone out. That's the brain trying to protect you, and that can be a problem. Another thing is that there's flashbacks. You can be going on in life, and all of a sudden you get a memory. You get a nightmare. You get a flashback of a painful event from the past, and those can be challenging to deal with, but that is part of the brain healing. That is part of the brain still working through, sifting through stuff that needs to heal. So don't beat yourself up for that. Don't overreact to that. Say, okay, thank you. Now I know what I need to talk to my therapist about. Now I need to know something that needs my attention. Another part of how trauma affects the brain is memory gaps. And so a child in constant danger is a body, a nervous system that is secreting cortisol all the time to give energy to fight or flight. But cortisol affects memories in the brain. It affects the brain's ability to bring the emotions and details of memories together. And so people can have memory gaps where they don't remember years of their life, but they can still have emotional flashbacks, so that emotions get triggered and all of a sudden they're panicking. Or they can have great detailed memories, but no emotions attached to it. It's like they're reading a phone book. They just, that terrible thing happened, and there's zero effect emotionally. That can happen. And so what you have to realize is that when you're in safety, cortisol stops in the brain can start to heal, memories can start to get restored and put back together. That can take years. Some memories may not come back. Don't worry about that. Focus on what you are aware are your issues that came out of your trauma. Work on them. You don't have to have all your memories in order to heal. And then the other final thing that comes out of complex trauma is complex trauma, because of danger, keeps you in survival mode. That keeps you in a limbic brain, fight, flight. I need to act in the immediate to keep safe. I don't have time to think long term. I don't have time to weigh out options. I don't have time to think, is this a healthy or unhealthy behavior? I might have to lie now or I'm going to die. I might have to steal now or cheat now or I'm going to die. It's all about limbic brain impulses to stay safe. A child's brain is basically a limbic brain. That's where a child thinks. Instant gratification. They don't think long term. They don't think healthy. But a child, as they go through their teen years, is beginning to transition to learning to think long term, learning to think healthy. And that's why the teen years can be turbulent, because you're still limbic brain, but cortex is taking over. A mature adult is listening to their limbic brain, but their cortex is running the show. But a person from complex trauma, the limbic brain is still in the driver's seat. They still are impulsive. They still think short term, instant gratification. Those can be huge problems. And if they are in their cortex and doing well, but they get triggered by fear or stress, they jump to their limbic brain. The limbic brain pushes the cortex out of the driver's seat and says, I'm taking over. Now I'm going to go back to survival ways of coping. In that couple minutes, they can do a tremendous amount of damage. And so learning to listen to my limbic brain, acknowledge my limbic brain, but not let it take over, learning to regulate my limbic brain, stay in my cortex, is a huge skill for people to learn as they begin to heal their trauma. So those are just a handful of ways that trauma affects the brain. Significant ways, powerful ways, ways that take a lot of work and time to heal. But it is possible to do it. You will probably need help. You will probably need teaching. You will need a mentor, a therapist, people that can give you tools. But it is possible to do that. And I wish you well on the journey.